In the crystal cities of Cyphera, where the towers were carved from living glass and the streets glowed softly underfoot, life was gentle and calm. The Cypherans, tall beings with pale lavender skin and eyes like polished opal, spent their days in music, trade, and learning. They did not worry about war. They did not build vast weapons. Their planet was peaceful, their people content. Children often gathered at twilight in the courtyards where silver-leaf trees spread their branches wide, and they sat in circles around the hearthstones that flickered with blue fire. Old storytellers would come, robed in shimmering cloth, their voices slow and deep, telling ancient tales meant to fill the young ones with wonder. Among these stories was one favorite above all, the legend of the humans. The old ones spoke of humans as if they were creatures from a dream. Strange beings with skin like moonlight or sunburned clay, eyes that shone with fierce colors, and hearts that burned hotter than any star. It was said that long ago, humans traveled everywhere, sailing on rivers of starlight in ships of metal. They built empires that stretched across thousands of worlds. Some storytellers said the humans were cruel conquerors. Others claimed they were gentle, coming only to help, to teach, to heal. But all agreed on one point: they vanished. Vanished so completely that no living Cypheran had ever seen one. As generations passed, the stories twisted into myth, then into harmless bedtime nonsense. The children of Cyphera loved these tales. They giggled and gasped when the old ones described fierce human warriors in shining armor, standing atop broken worlds, or human doctors with tiny silver instruments who could heal any wound. When the stories ended, the children would beg for more. Then they would run off to play, never suspecting these fables could ever walk under their own bright skies. So it was, on the eve of the Festival of Dawns, that life continued as it always had. The streets were filled with laughter and bright market stalls. Everywhere, garlands of sun feathers fluttered from balconies, and musicians played cheerful tunes. The people prepared for the great lantern procession that would take place after nightfall, sending thousands of glowing orbs into the sky to dance among the stars. Elder Counselor Veyron stood on the highest balcony of the Hall of Light, watching it all. He was older than most, his hair a drift of silver, his robes layered and heavy with honor. Even for him, the festival stirred fond memories of childhood. He felt the weight of leadership less on nights like this. A soft breeze carried the scent of blossom wine and roasted nuts. His mind drifted, half listening to the ceremonial bands playing far below. Then, quite suddenly, something changed. It was small at first. A slight tremor in the ground, so gentle it might have been overlooked. Then another, stronger. Distant windows rattled. The music faltered. Veyron's eyes narrowed as he leaned out over the balcony rail. Far across the city, beyond the rooftops and garden domes, he saw lights in the sky. Not the soft golden lanterns they had prepared, but harsh, flickering lights like distant fires. Another tremor rolled through the stone. This time shouts rose up from the streets. Merchants clutched their stalls. A cart toppled, spilling bright fruits across the glowing road. Somewhere a child began to cry. The palace guards at Veyron's side gripped their slender spears, eyes wide. From the eastern horizon came a strange sound, a deep, thrumming hum that set the very air vibrating. It grew louder and louder until it pressed against their chests, stealing their breath. Veyron's heart raced. This was no earthquake. This was something in the sky, something massive. He tore his eyes from the horizon and turned toward the great observatory spire that stood atop a nearby hill. Already, alarm bells were ringing there. Lights flared inside its domes. He could see silhouettes rushing from console to console, no doubt trying to make sense of the instruments that were surely screaming warnings. Then, through the haze of twilight, the impossible happened. Shapes appeared, at first dark specks, then swiftly growing. They glided across the sky in long, precise formations. They were too angular, too deliberate to be birds or drifting seed ships. As they came closer, Veyron saw them clearly, enormous vessels of dark metal, bristling with strange protrusions, each leaving a faint trail of blue fire. There were dozens. No, hundreds. They filled the horizon from end to end, blotting out the first rising stars. Gasps rose from the streets. All across the city, people poured from their homes, pointing upward, faces pale and horrified. The humming became a roar as the first ships passed directly overhead. Windows shattered from the force. Flags whipped violently. Children screamed. Parents grabbed them, running for doorways. Veyron felt his knees weaken. His mind struggled to understand. These were ships, clearly ships flying in disciplined ranks. But no Cypheran nation had such a fleet. No neighbor on any nearby world could field a force like this. Then, somewhere deep in his memory, from long ago nights sitting at hearthstones just like the children of today, he heard an old storyteller's voice whisper, "Humans." His mouth went dry. Could it be? Could these be the very beings of legend, come from old fables to walk once more among them? The thought seemed mad, and yet what else could it be? Even as he grappled with this, a new terror seized him. If these truly were humans, come not as friends but as conquerors, what chance did Cyphera have? Below, the streets had descended into chaos. Market stalls lay abandoned. Doors slammed shut. Above it all, the alarm bells tolled on and on. From hidden armories, the city guard began to pour forth, sleek ships rising on columns of light to form a protective dome around the capital. They were beautiful crafts, elegant and swift. But looking up at the dark tide of metal moving overhead, Veyron felt a sinking certainty that their own defenses were but toys by comparison. His chief aide, a young official named Saren, ran up breathless, eyes wide with terror. "Elder Counselor, the observatories confirm it. Hundreds of unidentified vessels have entered high orbit. Smaller craft are moving into atmospheric positions. We have no response to our hails. What are your orders?" Veyron gripped the balcony rail until his knuckles turned white. Orders? What orders could he give? He wanted to scream that this could not be real, that they must surely be hallucinating some fever dream brought on by festival wine. But the cold metal beneath his hands was real. The shaking of the stones was real. The cries of fear from his people were all too real. He drew a long, ragged breath. "Send word to all districts. Tell them to shelter indoors. Post the guard at every major hall. And keep trying to communicate. Perhaps they will answer." Saren bowed shakily and ran off, shouting into his wrists. Veyron stood alone again, staring up as another wave of ships swept overhead. His mind clawed for any scraps of history, any records of ancient treaties or defenses. But there was nothing. The humans, if that's who they were, existed only in songs and bedtime tales. They were never meant to be real. Far beyond the city, in the mountain monasteries where monks painted long scrolls of star lore, the ground quaked so fiercely that ancient vases toppled and shattered. Aged monks stumbled from their studies, clutching one another, their serene faces broken by alarm. They looked up to see the same impossible sight: dark shapes moving in disciplined rows, like a school of metal leviathans swimming across a violet sky. In small villages by the sapphire seas, fishermen abandoned their nets and ran for the hills, casting fearful glances upward. Herds of graceful runners stampeded across the plains, their instincts screaming of danger. All across Cyphera, the same single question burned in every mind: what were these visitors, and what did they want? At the same time, far above the atmosphere, the great ships of the unknown fleet adjusted their formation with silent precision. Tiny pinpricks of light detached and plunged downward, smaller craft descending toward major population centers. Each ship's belly glowed with blue fire. Inside, tall figures moved about in shadows, checking strange instruments, their unreadable faces hidden behind smooth helmets. In the lead vessel, a figure taller than the rest stood at a wide transparent panel, studying the gentle world below. Its hand rested lightly on the glass, as if feeling the planet's heartbeat. Without words, the command passed from ship to ship, and more landing craft broke off, slipping down through clouds toward the trembling cities. Back on Cyphera, Elder Counselor Veyron received the first reports. Unidentified ships had landed outside smaller settlements. Troops, if that's what they were, had disembarked and were moving in careful lines, scanning everything with devices that glowed red at the tips. So far, there were no attacks. No shots fired. But panic made reason hard to find. Many villagers fled into the forests or locked themselves in cellars. Stories of entire families vanishing into shadowed ships raced from mouth to mouth, growing wilder with each telling. In truth, most of these stories were false, born of fear. But a few were horribly true. In the capital itself, Veyron prepared for the worst. The grand hall was filled with armored guards, their usually decorative spears now crackling with blue energy. Citizens were being herded into underground sanctuaries. Everywhere he looked, he saw confusion, fear, and sorrow. This was supposed to be a night of joy, of lanterns, and dancing. Now it felt like the end of everything. Veyron closed his eyes for a heartbeat, trying to calm the storm in his chest. Then he opened them, lifted his chin, and stepped forward. Whatever these beings were, be they monsters from old nightmares or forgotten kin returned, they would find Cyphera standing, not cowering. Above, the vast fleet hovered still, silent and cold. It was a sight that would haunt the dreams of every Cypheran for generations. For now, the ships simply watched. The humming of their engines thrummed like a heartbeat in the bones of every living creature below. No one yet knew if that heartbeat was the herald of salvation or doom. But as the first alien figures stepped into the bright avenues of Cyphera's heart, their dark forms stark against the radiant streets, one truth rang clear in every terrified mind: the old stories were not stories at all. Humans, or something close enough to the legends to make no difference, had come at last. And their purpose was still a shadow, waiting to reveal its shape. Fear took Cyphera by the throat and would not let go. All across the shining cities, the gentle routines of life shattered like fragile glass. The festival stalls that once overflowed with bright fruit and spun sugar delights stood abandoned, colorful awnings flapping wildly in the rising gusts stirred by the massive ships above. Musicians dropped their flutes and string harps, fleeing the squares where once they filled the air with soft melodies. Instead of songs, the streets filled with the shrill cries of children and the barked orders of city guards trying to maintain order. In the towering living glass domes where scholars debated philosophy, stacks of scrolls were left scattered on mosaic floors as the wise fled to hidden basements. Meanwhile, the great news orbs that floated at every intersection came alive with urgent broadcasts. Broadcaster faces once so calm and smiling now trembled with fear, voices shaking as they relayed the same terrifying images over and over: colossal dark ships blotting out the sky, flocks of smaller craft descending on pillars of blue fire, armored figures stepping onto Cypheran soil. In one quiet neighborhood not far from the Hall of Light, a mother clutched her two small children close as they peered through their window at the hovering monsters. The older child, a boy of about 9, whispered, "Mama, is it true? Are they the humans from stories?" His mother's face crumpled, but she forced a brave smile, smoothing his hair with a trembling hand. "Maybe, my love. But even stories can surprise us. We must wait and see." Inside, her heart galloped wildly. She remembered those same tales from her own childhood: humans who built miracles, humans who burned worlds. Which were these? A neighbor pounded on the door then, shouting that the city guard was ordering everyone into the lower halls. She gathered her children quickly, trying not to show the terror clawing at her throat. Meanwhile, Elder Counselor Veyron stood with the High Command in the great defense chamber beneath the palace. Here, crystal screens shimmered with tactical overlays of the entire planet. Dozens of red icons each representing an unknown ship hovered in formation above Cypher's major cities. Smaller icons clustered on the surface, signaling landing sites. Shaky reports from scouts confirmed that the newcomers were spreading out in organized patrols, scanning local structures, sampling soil, even pausing to examine flowering trees. But so far, no shots fired. No structures destroyed. It was this eerie restraint that chilled Veyron the most. If they meant to attack, why wait? What game was this? His top general, a grim-faced woman named Tavira, slammed a fist on the table. We must strike now, Elder Counselor. Our ships are ready. Let us drive them back before they bring more forces. Around her, several other officers nodded, their eyes hard. Veyron's heart twisted. He understood their fear. Every instinct screamed to protect their people. But a deeper voice inside urged caution. If they wanted us dead, he said quietly, wouldn't they have already begun the slaughter? They hold every advantage. Tavira's jaw clenched. Or they're softening us with fear, waiting for us to stand down so they can strike more cleanly. The argument spiraled into raised voices. Some shouted to deploy the sky armadas immediately. Others begged to open all channels, try again for peaceful contact. Amid the noise, Veyron closed his eyes, summoning the memory of festival lights, children laughing, silver leaf petals drifting on warm breezes. He could not bear to see those memories buried under ashes. At last he raised his hand, and the chamber fell silent. We will try once more to communicate. Prepare our fleet to defend, yes, but we will not be the first to spill blood. Let them show their true face. Above them, the massive ships continued their silent watch. In distant farming regions, sleek Cypheran patrol flyers zipped low over fields, scanning for any signs of aggression. Often, they found the strange visitors standing quietly in meadows, studying local plants with small handheld devices that beeped and hummed. In the fishing harbors, alien soldiers stood at the water's edge, pointing scanners into the turquoise depths as wary villagers hid behind nets and crates. The visitors never spoke. Their mirrored helmets revealed nothing. Each time a Cypheran patrol approached too closely, the humans simply raised a hand in a calm, universal gesture. Wait. Wait for what? No one could say. And so, tension coiled tighter and tighter around the entire planet. Mothers held children close through sleepless nights. Merchants locked their shops, praying softly to old gods. In temples, priests lit rows of candles, chanting ancient songs of hope. Meanwhile, Veyron and his advisors sent desperate messages into the void, broadcasting greetings in every known dialect, offering peaceful meetings, even pleading if need be. Days passed. No reply came. It happened on the fifth day. Without warning, one of the largest alien ships broke formation and began a slow descent toward the Vale of Concord, a wide green plain not far from the capital, known for its bright flowers and quiet streams. Panic swept through nearby towns. Many fled into the forests, dragging carts of food and squawking livestock. From the sky, long narrow craft dropped toward the valley floor, hovering on shimmering blue fields of force before settling in neat ranks. Dozens of dark armored figures emerged, forming precise lines, each holding odd staff-like tools that pulsed with dim light. High above, Veyron stood aboard his own command ship, watching through a wide viewport. Around him, the Cypheran sky armadas hung ready. Slender, elegant warships, their silver hulls etched with graceful calligraphy, now charged for battle. His generals waited for his word. His throat felt like stone. One wrong order might doom them all. Then a signal arrived, clear, steady, ancient beyond belief. On a private channel known only to Cypheran historians, a human voice spoke in their oldest recorded tongue, from treaties inked thousands of years ago. It said, simply, to the people of Cyphera, we come to fulfill a promise forgotten by time. That voice was calm, strong, strangely sorrowful. The entire bridge went silent. Officers stared at each other, eyes wide. Tavira swallowed hard. Elder Counselor, that dialect hasn't been spoken in over 40 centuries. Veyron exhaled shakily. Then it is true. The old stories. The alliances. Somehow, they lived on. His mind reeled. If these humans honored such an ancient pact, perhaps there was hope. Or perhaps this was a clever trick, learned from dusty archives to lower their guard. Either way, the moment had come to choose. With trembling hands, he signaled the flagship comms. Prepare a delegation. I will meet them in the Vale of Concord. Alone if I must. The vale was eerily quiet when Veyron's skimmer settled on the soft grass. Birds that usually sang from crystal-leaved branches had long fled. He stepped down with slow dignity, flanked by only 2 aides and unarmed, his last show of faith. Ahead, rows of alien soldiers stood perfectly still, their armor dark and smooth, their visors reflecting nothing but sky. At their center, a single figure stepped forward. She was tall, broad-shouldered, clad in plate that shimmered with faint blue glyphs. Her helmet hissed and lifted away, revealing a human face, pale gold skin marked by an old scar across one cheek, dark eyes that held centuries of sorrow. Her gaze met Veyron's. Neither spoke for a long moment. Then she knelt, of all things, placing one fist to the earth. Cyphera, she said softly, your old kin has returned. Darkness follows us. We have no place else to stand but here, beside you. Veyron's breath left him in a rush. His aides whispered prayers. Slowly, painfully, he lowered himself to one knee as well, hand pressing to the grass. It was the greeting from the oldest packs acknowledging shared soil, shared fate. When he stood again, tears streaked his lined face. You truly are the humans of our legends. She nodded once. We are what remains. My name is Illyra, captain of the Terran refuge fleet. Our worlds burn behind us. The same horror that hunts us will come for you. We beg your alliance, for both our people's sakes. Captain Illyra rose from her kneeling position with a slow, deliberate grace. Her dark eyes did not break from Veyron's, and in that long, silent exchange he felt an entire ocean of pain and urgency pour across the space between them. Then she lifted a small device from her belt, pressed something on its surface, and spoke a soft command. From behind the human ranks, more armored soldiers stepped aside to allow a trio of strange floating drones to hover forward. They unfolded like flowers, projecting bright, swirling holograms into the air between the two leaders. Veyron gasped as he saw entire worlds, spinning and glittering, then suddenly breaking apart under swarms of blackness that writhed like living nightmares. Cities that dwarfed even Cyphera's greatest capitals burned in eerie silence. Stars themselves seemed to dim and vanish, leaving voids that swallowed everything. These, Illyra said quietly, her voice steady despite the horrors on display, are the Shadran. They awaken every 30,000 cycles. They move from galaxy to galaxy, consuming biomass, draining light, harvesting all that lives. They have come to our quadrant now. Our colonies fell in weeks. Earth itself stands on the edge of annihilation. Her throat tightened, and her next words sounded raw. We are not conquerors. We are refugees. We searched for any sanctuary and then found this. She gestured toward the ground, the fields, the trembling Cypherans standing far off. This world. This old promise. The last hope of an ancient kinship. Please, Elder Counselor. Do not turn us away. Veyron felt his knees weaken. One of his aides wept openly. For a moment he longed to be nothing more than an old man in a quiet garden, tending sunflowers, forgetting all duty. But the faces of his people rose before him, merchants, children, singers, even the nervous scholars who once laughed at the myths of humans. They all depended on him now. With a slow breath, he reached out and let his fingers brush the light of the human projections. It felt strangely warm. "If this pact is truly so old," he whispered, "then we are bound by honor to aid you. But we are not warriors. We have few weapons, few ships of war. We thought we lived beyond such terrors." Illyra's eyes softened. "We did too. Once. We will stand for you, if you stand with us. Teach your fleets our tactics. Lend us your skies and oceans to build defenses. Together we might hold. Alone, neither of us will." At that, she extended her hand. Veyron stared at it, so small, so oddly shaped compared to a Cypheran's long delicate fingers. Yet in it lay not just the weight of two species, but perhaps every living thing on this side of the stars. Slowly, he placed his palm in hers. Her grip was firm, warm, almost painfully alive. The Vale of Concord had witnessed many treaties across Cyphera's long history. None so vital as this. Word spread like wildfire. In every market and harbor, on every glass street and temple step, Cypherans gathered around news orbs that now flickered with footage of human officers speaking solemn words beside Cypheran elders. They watched new kinds of ships streak across their skies, sleek dark fighters that drilled in tight formations, teaching local pilots maneuvers once only spoken of in myth. The panic that first gripped Cyphera slowly shifted into a brittle hope, then into a somber determination. Artists even painted vast murals on the sides of towers, humans and Cypherans standing side by side, weapons raised not against each other, but against shadows in the distance. Not all welcomed this uneasy alliance. In the marble council chambers of distant Cypheran provinces, more conservative leaders raged against Veyron's decision. "We let the ghosts of old stories land on our soil, and now they dig trenches in our fields," shouted one governor. Another hissed, "We should drive them back into the sky before they drag that darkness here." But every day brought new reports from orbital scouts Shadran probes, nightmarish black spheres that drifted closer to the system's edge, testing defenses. Even the harshest critics began to falter when confronted with raw images, entire planetary systems blinking out under roiling clouds of Shadran biomass. Meanwhile, Cypheran children watched in wide-eyed wonder as human engineers set up camps on the outskirts of cities. They marveled at towering mechs that strode like giants across open plains, testing their cannons with earth-shaking roars. Human medics, faces kind and patient, tended to the inevitable accidents among curious villagers who ventured too close. In quiet moments, human soldiers sat cross-legged with local youths, showing them small light puzzles or simple martial drills. Slowly, distrust softened at the edges. In hidden monasteries, ancient scrolls were carefully unrolled. Monks who once only painted serene star maps now worked with human historians to reconstruct the last records of the first pact, a promise made when Cyphera was young, a covenant of mutual defense should either species ever face annihilation. For the first time in living memory, Cypherans realized they were not the center of a quaint, peaceful universe, but part of a much older, harsher, interconnected destiny. And so the entire planet bent itself to the task of survival. The weeks rushed by in a blur of preparation. Cypheran shipyards that once built graceful merchant vessels now churned out dark, armor-plated gunships under human design. Entire forests near the poles were cleared reluctantly, tearfully to supply raw materials for planetary defense grids. On the high steps, massive shield towers rose, each crowned by swirling blue crystals that hummed with barely contained power. Human drill instructors barked commands to wide-eyed Cypheran recruits who had never held more than a hunting staff in their lives. In great underground factories, joint teams forged new energy weapons, blending Cypheran crystalline technology with rugged Terran plasma cores. Yet always, there were those who doubted. Small rebellions flared up, led by firebrand leaders who claimed Cyphera should cast out the humans before they brought ruin down on gentle heads. "Better to kneel to fate than sell our souls to war," one passionate speaker shouted in the largest city of the eastern continent. Riots broke out. Shops were smashed, Human workers threatened. Captain Illyra traveled personally to these flashpoints, standing without armor or escort in public squares, her voice carrying strong and steady, "If you send us away, we will go. We will not chain you to our fight. But the Shadran will not ask your permission to feast on your children's bones. Decide wisely which terror you will embrace: the known allies who bleed and weep as you do, or the black tide that does not dream, does not bargain, does not leave anything alive." It worked. Slowly, stubbornly, unity returned. Veyron himself toured refugee camps set up for human civilians who had nowhere else to flee. He sat with mothers from distant Terran colonies, their eyes hollow with grief, clutching small belongings, all that was left of vanished worlds. One gave him a crude drawing: Cypherans and humans standing under a sun together. He wept over it in private that night, understanding perhaps for the first time that this was no mere alliance of necessity, but the last fragile link in a chain that stretched across millennia. Their destinies were bound. When the Shadran finally came, it was as if the night itself rose up from beyond the edge of the system and poured inward. Thousands of living ships, organic shapes slick with black ichor, drifted in endless formations. Where they passed, local stars dimmed, smothered by a parasitic hunger. In orbit above Cyphera, the joint human-Cypheran fleet formed a desperate shell. In deep bunkers, children clutched each other, listening to the low wail of planetary alarms. The first clashes were brutal. Shadran tendrils speared through defense lines, vomiting clouds of spore drones that crawled across ship hulls, eating metal and flesh alike. Human dreadnoughts fired blazing lances of energy that carved temporary wounds in the swarm. Cypheran crystal arrays ignited, casting wide nets of searing light that shredded attackers by the hundreds. But for every horror destroyed, more poured in. Veyron watched from the central war chamber as entire flotillas winked out. He felt each loss like a spear through the chest. Yet amid the chaos, hope shone too. Cypheran pilots who weeks ago had never flown combat now maneuvered with desperate brilliance, diving through impossibly tight gaps to protect their new human comrades. Human mechs fought back to back with local walker teams on the ground, their combined firepower blasting Shadran incursion beasts into smoking husks. In villages across Cyphera, families opened their homes to human children evacuated from doomed ships, sharing meager stores of grain and sweet fruit without question. The battle raged for days, then weeks. Slowly, so painfully slowly, the joint forces began to turn the tide. Each victory cost oceans of blood and tears, but the Shadran swarm thinned at last, battered by a coalition they never expected. In the final assault, Illyra herself led a suicide run into the heart of the largest Shadran nest ship, detonating a planet cracker device that split the monstrosity in half, sending shockwaves that scattered the remaining invaders. Her last transmission was a quiet whisper in Veyron's ear: "Tell them we stood together. Tell them, we were not myths." When it was over, Cyphera's skies were littered with the drifting remains of both friend and foe. But the sun rose clear and bright, the first unblotted dawn in what felt like forever. On high balconies, Cypheran children released thousands of lanterns into the new morning, each carrying a simple prayer: for their lost, for the strange cousins from old legends, for peace. Veyron stood among them, hand resting on the shoulder of a human orphan boy with tear-streaked cheeks. They watched the lanterns climb higher and higher until they vanished into blue. And in that fragile, quiet moment, a new myth was born, not of humans who were distant fables, but of humans who came home to fight alongside Cypherans when the stars turned dark. Together, they had proved that even the oldest legends could be true, and that sometimes, the greatest story was simply choosing to stand side by side when the universe tried to tear them apart.